Greetings everyone, and I'm actually going to do something very different this time around. I am actually going to be talking about a project that I've been wanting to do for quite a while, and I'm going to finally talk about it, and that is, I may not be able to do a top 20 list, but I decided that I was going to do a top 10 favorite Batman villains video. That's right, these are the top 10 villains in Batman's Rogues Gallery that I find really interesting, that I love to read in the comics, that I would love to see in live action, or that I would just love to see as like a boss fight in one of the Rocksteady Arkham games and whatnot. And while I admit that Batman is oversaturated and overrated, especially nowadays, as well as some of his more popular villains like Joker and whatnot, there is a certain quality to Batman that you gotta love. Because Batman has such a great rogues gallery. Very obscure villains, but yet some of them are extremely dangerous. And this video that you're going to see here, at least for the Batman portion, I've also got a Superman one that I'm going to work on. But I figured since I did a rant, and as did everybody else, that it's only appropriate that I basically talk about the Dark Knight, and in a sense try to buy back that video by proving that, you know, I do love Batman in his rogues gallery. I just wish that DC would not make him the only hero that they predominantly use. So without further delay, let us get into my top 10 favorite Batman villains, I guess you can say of all time, or ones that I really love. You decide the title here. And as it's coming up, and I think I will start it off with probably one of my favorites that's very obscured and was introduced to me in the 90s animated series. And at number 10 is the anamorphic the anamorphic, shape-shifting villain known as Clayface. And I like Clayface because Clayface, to me, is a very dangerous villain for Batman. He can basically take, and I especially love the 90s animated series version of Clayface because he was an actor. And that could make Clayface a very dangerous villain if written correctly. Because one thing that you gotta understand about Clayface is that his whole entire body is a weapon. He can form weapons out of his clay-like body. He can shapeshift. He can make his voice sound like anyone. He could basically become a mole inside the Bat family and could basically destroy it from within, but he's mainly used as like a cliche stock like supporting villain. And I think Clayface has the potential to be more than just a stock cliche like side villain. I think Clayface, as I said, if written properly, could be a very dangerous foe for not only the Dark Knight but the entire Bat family. And so doing a top 10 list instantly, there was no doubt who my number 10 was, and arguably it's Clayface. Out of many of the obscure like D to C list-esque villains, I think Clayface is a villain that deserves his due. But at the same time, seeing him in Arkham Asylum, seeing him kind of used throughout both incarnations of the 90s animated series, I can't really, and even in some of the video games, I can't really complain that Clayface is not used. I just don't think that he's personally being used to his full potential. But we'll see. Only time will tell. And moving on to my number 9 character. Let the credit roll up here. Number 9 is arguably one of Batman's more realistic villains. I use air quotes here, and that is the psychopath, and that is the tally-marking psychopathic villain known as Victor Zsasz. And Zsasz is a very dark villain, at least in my personal opinion, and the whole entire MO of Zsasz is to slit people's throats and rearrange them as if they're actual, like, dummies. And he forms tally marks on his body and basically describes that we are all zombies and that in killing us, he is liberating us from a very mundane and boring existence. And it's this kind of psychosis and this kind of deranged sociopathic tendencies that rather intrigues me about Zsasz. And also the fact that Zsasz has repeatedly told Batman that he and Batman are one and the same. That Batman doesn't kill, though, that Batman would prefer to protect the zombies, as he likes to refer to all of us. And in Zsasz's mind, he hopes one day to either make a tally mark for Batman or to try to get Batman on his side. But more than likely, we will see Zsasz try to actually kill Batman. And... oh, sorry, hit my mic there. But it is these psychopathic tendencies of Zsasz that actually make me like his character. Because I think that his whole ideology and MO are very interesting, and plus, I think that Zsasz, at least in a proper and somewhat toned down version of a Batman film, could make for a very dangerous foe. But I sincerely doubt that Zsasz will actually be toned down, considering how dark his character is. But moving on to number 8. Number 8 is Edward Nygma, aka the Riddler. And it's hard to see, and it's not really hard to fathom why I like the Riddler. But I'll go ahead and explain it anyway. I like Nygma for the simple fact that he's not out to collect hostages, he's not out to become the king crime boss of Gotham City. Nygma's whole goal is to simply prove that he is the intellectual superior to Batman. And it is this kind of mindset that not only makes the Riddler such a great and intriguing villain, but overall, what is there to say about the Riddler? Just his whole MO of trying to outsmart Batman is arguably something that I actually have to admire. And to a certain extent, if you're a fan of supervillains, you have to admire Nygma's creativity of always wanting to try to outsmart Batman. And in some ways, even though he's a villain, I do kind of root for Nygma at times, hoping that one day he will actually stump the Dark Knight with one of his riddles. But we've seen Jim Carrey portray him, and we've seen, as you see in this picture here, Frank Gorshin, and honestly, those versions of the Riddler, however over the top, are always entertaining. Even the 90s cartoon version, to a certain degree, is entertaining. I have yet to really see any bad incarnation, in my opinion, of the Riddler. He is a character that I hope will continue to be used in anything that involves Batman, because I think he is one of the more interesting villains in his rogues gallery. Moving on to number 7 is the reptilian psychopath known as Killer Croc. And I like Waylon Jones simply because, I mean, just look at him. He doesn't even look human. He looks more animal than man. And it's hard to not be intimidated or scared by a guy that's at least like 7.5 to 8 feet tall, can charge at you with the speed of a rhino, virtually feels almost no pain, whose appearance is very much reptilian, and a guy who is very cannibalistic and at his core in tune with his animal tendencies. This is the same guy who actually bit off Officer Aaron Cash's hand. But the real reason why I enjoy Croc so much is simply the fact, as I said, that he is an animal at his core, but also, as biased and as silly as this sounds, I just like Killer Croc because he looks awesome. There's no other way for me to really phrase that. I love Croc simply because he is awesome looking. But at the same time, I also like Croc simply for the fact that he started out as a circus freak wrestling crocodiles and alligators. And they portray that he has near superhuman strength. And looking at this guy's appearance, strong or not, he is very dangerous. Number 6. Number 6 is Gotham's Yin Yang, aka Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face. Now, what I love about Two-Face as a villain is simply the double entendre of right and wrong, good and evil, yin and yang. And the fact that Dent's dual personality as Clayface and as Harvey Dent is complicated by the scratched up coin that he carries with him. And the fact that, Dent's psyche is damaged to the point to where it's like where he relies on this coin to an obsessive manner. With one flip of the coin, with a game of chance, you could live or you could die. Two-Face could end up being a good guy, or he could end up being a bad guy. And it's this double entendre, this intriguing personality split that really makes Two-Face not only a very well-known and respected Batman villain, but it also makes Harvey Dent, even though he's a villain, you can't help but kind of feel, at least prior to him trying to be stitched up by Hush and then re-throwing acid on himself, you can't help but feel sorry for Dent. But the way that they portrayed him in the current comics now, Dent doesn't even need the coin anymore. He might as well just go around and shoot people. And that's one aspect of the current comics that I really don't like. I want them to go back to making Two-Face a very sympathetic character, because Aaron Eckhart, as you see here, I think played a very sympathetic and very tragic Two-Face in The Dark Knight. Number 5. Number 5 is Selina Kyle, also known as Catwoman. Now, I'm going to be fairly honest, and I say this with all humbleness, I really don't consider Catwoman to be a villain of Batman. I consider her more of an anti-hero. And the reason for that is because even though she steals, and even though she does occasionally kill, Selina Kyle is not really a murderer or a bad person. She's just a girl who wants to have nice things. And although she's butted heads with the Dark Knight many times, I still feel that way towards Selina. I still feel that she is an anti-hero of sorts. But regardless, she is a femme fatale that has tried numerous times to seduce Batman. And I will admit, in the current comics, I like the relationship between her and Bruce. And I'm hoping with this whole rehash, reboot, whatever you want to call it, that they will keep the both of them together. Because I really want to see where Batman and Catwoman's relationship will go from there. And arguably, Catwoman is on this list simply because, well, what other reason is there? She's Catwoman, and she kicks ass. That's all I really need to know or care about. And plus, the fact that she's in tight leather also helps, but we're not going to get into that. That was probably a little too personal, but still, Catwoman is an awesome female character and more than righteously deserves to be on my list, as is anyone else's. Number 4. Yes, I know I'm going to get a lot of crap for this, but you know what? I can't help it. Number 4 is the Joker. And honestly, you can't blame me for putting the Joker on this list, because the Joker is just absolutely hilarious. He is... yeah, he's under the bed. Sorry, had my headset keeps trying to fall off my head, but you can't help me for not liking the Joker. But you know, the Joker, as oversaturated and overrated as he is, I still can't help but love the character simply because he is hilarious, unpredictable, dangerous. He is the anarchy and chaos to Batman's law and order and discipline. Whereas F.W. Waller enjoys the Jack Napier, Jack Nicholson, Tim Burton Batman Joker, I will always, to this day, always and forever, remember the 90s animated Joker voiced by Mark Hamill. Every time that I read a comic, watch a movie, or play a video game, I always expect when the Joker speaks to hear Mark Hamill's voice come out of the Joker's mouth. Because arguably, if you've watched the 90s animated series, you can't really blame me for always imagining Hamill's voice as the Joker. And overall, the Joker, what is there to say about the Joker that hasn't already been said? Moving on to the next villain. Number 3. Number 3 is the Demon Head, Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul is to Batman what Professor Moriarty was to Sherlock Holmes. He is the intellectual and physical antithesis of what Batman is. However, what opposes Ra's and Batman is their ideologies and their views on human life. Ra's being an eco-terrorist, he believes technology is evil and that it will do nothing but corrupt humanity. Whereas Batman believes that Raz's techniques, however innovative they may be, or considering, how admirable his goal is, that he is murdering people in the process. And I always enjoy, in any comic, movie, or whatever that I see, I always enjoy Ra's al Ghul simply because whether it's a dialogue scene or a fight or anything like that, the stuff between Ra's al Ghul and Batman is always something that I can look forward to. A very witty, very smart, very intelligent, and very philosophical, shall we say, conversation or debate. There's just no other way to put it. Ra's al Ghul is arguably one of Batman's more intelligent and physically matching foes. Number 2. Get this shit off my screen. Stupid Schwarzenegger. There we go. Much better. Yes, number 2, and this should surprise anyone that knows me. For those of you that don't, yes, my second favorite Batman villain in the DC universe is Victor Freeze, aka Mr. Freeze. And it's really hard to argue as to why I wouldn't love Mr. Freeze, and it's more the psychological aspect of Victor himself. Although Victor is technically a villain, he is a very sympathetic Batman villain in the fact that he is, and he also raises the question of how far would you go for love? As evil and vile as some of Mr. Freeze's acts are, you can't help but feel sorry for Victor in the fact that all he's wanting to do is restore his wife Nora to life. And while he does a lot of heinous and unforgivable things, he more than kind of makes up for it with how loving and how sympathetic and how much he cares for his wife. And it's this antithesis and this psychological aspect of Mr. Freeze that I love so much and makes him such an extremely sympathetic character, that he goes to such evil lengths and does stuff that he would not morally agree to just so he can restore the love of his life instead of losing everything. And that's why Mr. Freeze more than deserves his number 2 spot. And number one is Dr. Jonathan Crane, also known as the Scarecrow. And what is there to really say about Scarecrow? Well, for starters, he's sick, he's psychotic, he's absolutely batshit crazy, even though he's... batshit. I just realized what I said there. He's absolutely crazy. The man feeds and actually gets off other people's fears. The whole point of Scarecrow is that he wants to experiment on everyone like a guinea pig. He wants to see what makes people tick. He wants to see what they're afraid of and then exploit it. And if you don't know what I mean, then you need to get out there and read some comics and find out how dark, twisted, morbid, and just straight up sadistic this guy is. And that is it for my top 10 favorite Batman villains. I hope you enjoyed this, and look forward to my Superman top 10 list.